if you missed our last program, it is on our YouTube channel. So you can go to that later. But I am so happy to introduce the wonderful Dr. David Miller, who is the medical director of so many different things. The Family and Child Life Services, University Hospitals Rainbow Health. He's at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, a professor at Case Western Reserve University. So we are very pleased to have his expertise and his time for us tonight. So I'm gonna mute myself and go off screen until it's time for the Q&A. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Joan. And I want to thank the Literacy Cooperative for inviting me here to talk about a great topic, which is just nutrition and how it impacts our health. And we'll talk about numerous aspects of health tonight. And I don't have the chat or Q&A up right now, so I won't see those as those go in, but we'll answer those at the end, and can take time to answer questions all together, perhaps at that point. But yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm really excited to have you here and to think this through with everybody. And so we want to talk about nutrition, obviously, and what is good nutrition, which is always a really huge topic. You know, I think it's one of those things where sometimes people feel like, you know, we know about nutrition, we know these things, and yet at the same time, I see illnesses all the time in the clinic that could be prevented with better nutrition, and, you know, growth and development that could be optimized more, attention deficit kinds of disorders that could be better, more immune issues that could be improved through nutrition. And overall, I think sometimes people have general ideas, but the enacting of those can be quite challenging. And that is sort of a whole nother level of discussion about how to enact this completely for an individual family. But I do want to say, there we go, that I don't mean this to be specific individual medical advice. And so I do encourage you to talk to your providers about things that you may have questions with for your family, or I am happy to, of course, schedule an appointment and see you as well through Connor Whole Health with University of Chicago, and the scheduling number is there. And as Joan mentioned, this video will be available after the talk, and slides can be made available as well. I'm happy to share these. So our objectives tonight too are to talk about what are proper nutritional supports that foster optimal growth, thinking about how growth outcomes can really differ based on the different nutritional circumstances that you present to your kids. And that's a topic I really want to take home, and I'll give you an image for that shortly, because I think sometimes people feel like what we put in the body doesn't necessarily have a dramatic outcome, and I think it really does. And we don't necessarily show it as much as plants and some animals that we may see, because we're a little bit more complex organisms. But in reality, there are equivalents for human growth and development that are equally as profoundly affected by nutrition, as the image I'll show you shortly. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about supplementation too, and when is that appropriate? What supplementation, should you focus on, in understanding their strategies of use and how to source them. So Cornerstones of Health all involve, nutrition obviously is a huge one, but sleep is also a really key picture too. Exercise is a key component, emotions and stress management, relationships and structure of the day, and sensible precautions are all really part of our Cornerstones of Health. So while we think about nutrition and how important it is, we want to also just keep in mind, we want to optimize all of these factors as we think about the health of our families and how to really improve outcomes and optimize outcomes for our kids. So here's the image I wanted to show you first. And so I love this image because this is an image not of the same sunflower over time, but of the same type of sunflower planted into 4 different pots. And each of the pots receive different amounts of nutrients and water. And so the sunflower in pot number 1 got the poorest growing conditions, whereas the sunflower in pot 4 got the best growing conditions. So over the same period of time, you see the dramatic differences in expression of this genetic material of this plant based on what it was fed and how it was watered. And so humans, again, I will underscore, are very much the same. If we want to see our children grow up to be beautiful and robust sunflowers like this, we want to nourish them appropriately, we want to water them appropriately, and it will really change their genetic expression. It can alter things like how our brains develop. It can alter things like our probability of getting autoimmune disease, our probability of getting heart disease, diabetes, all sorts of types of conditions that sort of plague society because of nutritional problems that people and bad nutritional choices. So when we think about nutrition and what is good nutrition, there's some simple rules that you can generally apply. So you'll see in the news sometimes too, you'll see the Mediterranean diet is the best diet. It's most research, most evidence-based. And so that's okay, that's true because people have studied it most, but what are the qualities of a Mediterranean diet that actually make it so healthy? Because in reality, a traditional Asian diet can be amazingly healthy, a traditional, African diet can be amazingly healthy, a traditional South American diet can be amazingly healthy, because what those all have together in common is that they are whole foods diets. People are eating foods as they were designed in nature. They're not processed. They're not full of added sugars. They don't have added colors and additives and preservatives and artificial flavors and things like that. And they are what is called nutrient dense. So when you eat foods that have high nutrient density, it means they're full of vitamins and minerals and nutrients that you get. And then there are other foods that are very nutrient poor. And I'll show you more examples of those too. So your first rule of eating is you're looking for foods that are as nutrient dense as possible, meaning the highest nutrient content per the amount you're eating. A low glycemic index is also an idea too that I want you to remember. So the glycemic index is an idea that came up some years ago, 10, 20 years ago, that people started talking about this. And it's really a look at how fast does a food turn into sugar in our bloodstream? How quickly is it going to raise our blood sugars, change our insulin levels, and swing us in that way? And so generally we want foods with a lower glycemic index, meaning they don't turn to sugar so fast in the bloodstream. You can add some necessary supplements. There are a few we'll talk about that you generally won't get in your diet for the most part, and those do need to be supplemented. Water is also a really key component that gets underestimated in value. And I like to really encourage families to use smoothies and things like that as a way to get in those multiple servings of fruits and vegetables every day. I'm working, one of my current jobs is I'm working in the long haul COVID recovery clinic for kids. And what we're really finding is this type of eating makes a massive difference in the recovery. And that, we're asking, young people to eat we're eating 5 to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. And they just sort of stare at us like, how am I going to do that? Well, if you can get a smoothie going, you can get in 5 of those servings right there in your smoothie, and it can be quite delicious. And the trick with smoothies is you just don't want to add in extra sugars. So the way you want to sweeten them is with a little bit of natural sweeteners like honey or maple syrup, and potentially use, a base like coconut water or things like that that can have some natural good flavor to it. But smoothies can be an amazing way to get very high nutrient density, very high antioxidant value into your bodies really easily. And kids tend to love them, and they can be fun to make together. So creative cooking as well, engaging kids in cooking oftentimes increases the foods they are willing to eat, their sort of dietary adventureness, and if they help to prepare the food, they're more likely also, to eat it and to see you eat it and want to feed you, and to also develop, lifelong habits of learning to prepare their own food rather than to purchase it from a package that then gets frozen and microwaved, for example. And then if you are with an infant, breastfeeding is absolutely the best thing that you can do for nutrition in an infant if you are able. There are other things that sometimes need to be done, but if possible, breastfeeding is, at the top of the list of the best way to get nutrition into a baby. And then along those ways, having mom eat as healthy a diet as she can. So this is just an image that I show you of how nutrition is known, and all these different pieces come together to affect immunity. And so, this is from a peer-reviewed published article on immune function and micronutrients, and looking at the ways that can get, get off kilter, hectic lifestyles, eating not nutrient dense food, fast foods, things like that, as well as not eating the right range of foods. And so we know we need things like vitamins A, C, D, E, B2, 6, zinc, folic acid. All these things play a role in the function of the immune system. So especially during COVID, I had lots of families asking me, what can I do to optimize my immunity, my child's immunity? And really the answer is the best thing you can do is make sure they are getting all of these micronutrients to help them have as strong an immune system as they possibly can. And people who are deficient in these are known to suffer worse outcomes. And so your nutrient status plays a massive role in how you handle infections, including things as, problematic as coronavirus. So when we think about the nutrient density question, we have on the left our low nutrient density foods, which most likely will look quite familiar to all of us in the American world, and then our high nutrient density foods. So low nutrient density foods are often very carbohydrate rich. Carbohydrates are molecules that basically are complex sugars and turn into sugar really quickly. They tend to be very low fiber. They don't have a lot of vitamins and minerals. And so things like this kind of grouping of things in the fast food world is all just kind of garbagey food. And I know people love it because it's rich in sugar and salt, but it really will deplete you. It is the illusion of nourishing yourself, and it is an underlying cause of many diseases of the modern world. Whereas when we eat this whole more natural whole foods diet, you know, this is really the cornerstones of those ancient diets, is whole foods as they were in nature, prepared together in delicious ways and not processed or you know, altered sort of beyond recognition many times. So people will often fill up on the carbs and thereby eat less of these things. And there are negative consequences to that. And so I want to encourage you to shop on the outside of the aisles, generally at the grocery store, where all of the produce and fresh foods are kept for the most part, and try to be really mindful of what you buy from the center of the grocery store. And when you are shopping in the center, make sure you're reading your labels. There are many options for things as simple as like tomato sauce. You can get a tomato sauce that is, you know, tomatoes, salt, water, and spices, or you can get one that is full of artificial chemicals, colors, and sugars that is really an entirely different food. So, you know, you can have these great things, and there are plenty of choices we have, and it's easy to make better or worse choices. I was talking to a family recently about peanut butter, for example, and peanut butter, if you don't have an allergy, can be a wonderful food. But when I'm talking about peanut butter, I'm talking about essentially fresh ground peanuts that you might add a little bit of salt to and eat. Whereas if you read the labels on a lot of these other products, they're primarily full of palm oil and added sugar and preservatives and things that really actually clog your pores and don't nourish you. So, you know, read your labels, and if it's got more than 2 or 3 ingredients in what you're buying, it is probably not something you actually want to buy. And I would also underscore that kids learn to like and dislike the things they have an option to learn to like and dislike. So if they only know these foods from as early as possible, then that's their world, right? And they will not reject those foods when they don't know that there are other options. So if you present them these kinds of foods early on, then sure, they're going to oftentimes, not every kid, many kids will gravitate to these foods over here, the whole foods, but other kids can get sort of distracted and sort of seduced by the flavor palette over here. And then it's much harder to bring them back. So this is also some more information on nutrient-dense food. So pumpkin seeds, for example, pepitas, particularly the green raw ones, are one of my favorite foods, because if you look at these little things, the nutrient value per 100 grams is like crazy. They are basically little multivitamins that you can add to smoothies, you can add to salads, you can toast, you can, you know, throw into lots of different dishes. They have a really easy flavor profile, and they are anti-inflammatory. They support the immune system. They support prostate health. Have anti-diabetic effects, and have all of these micronutrients in them, which are really essential. So when people ask me too, like, do I need a multivitamin? I would really say, well, it depends what you're eating. If you're eating a whole foods diet with foods like these, most of us don't need sort of a routine low potency multivitamin because you're getting it in your food. But if you're not eating these things, that's when you need to start supplementing with those extra products. If you look at a comparison to what 100 grams of pasta has versus 100 grams of pumpkin seeds, you can see the vast differences in things like iron, magnesium, 18 milligrams in the pasta versus 592 in the pumpkin seeds. Zinc, 0.6 versus 7.81. Zinc is a critical nutrient for immunity. Magnesium is important for mood and anxiety and digestion and all sorts of metabolic processes. Copper, look at the difference there, 0.1 versus a 1300 over here. So the food choices you make are vastly different. And, you know, if you were ever taught by anybody the idea that a calorie is a calorie, it's really not true. It's how it's packaged makes a massive difference. So this is zinc, for example, in relation to the immune system. And this has been known since back in the 1960s, how zinc plays a role in regulating the function of the immune system. And it really allows our immune system to create these things called zinc fingers, is one of the things they're called, where your immune cells are actually able to reach out and grab onto invaders and fight them off. And if you're zinc deficient, we know you have more profound and longer things like the common cold. And so taking zinc at the first sign of a common cold is a recommendation that's evidence-based that will shorten the duration and intensity of even the common cold. So these primary nutrients really are the building blocks of everything. I would also warn you to watch for hidden sugars. This is a huge problem in our diets. Things as seemingly, sort of innocuous as tomato soup can have as much as 5 teaspoons of sugar. Soda should just not be in our diets at all. It's just incredible numbers of sugar. And I love this image that compares like these sodas to numbers of cookies equivalent. Like, would you really sit down and eat 18 cookies at a sitting? Probably not, I hope, but you might have like a large bottle of soda, which is essentially the same kind of thing. So, switch to things like flavored seltzers that don't have added sweeteners. And again, kids will like these things if they're introduced to them. And that becomes part of their normal day-to-day life. So the glycemic index we were talking about is that measure of how fast a food turns to sugar in the bloodstream. Not every food that's a high glycemic index food is a bad food. So things like pineapple and watermelon are high glycemic index, but they also have good nutrients to them. So you can totally eat those things, but just be mindful of that and eat them, not as often as you might eat a more a lower glycemic index food. But if you look at things like white bread or mashed potatoes or things like that, those turn to sugar almost immediately when hitting your bloodstream. And so they will really play a role in things like obesity development and diabetes. They can play a big role in that. Insulin swings also will affect your mood and your energy when you have energy crashes, like a little bit after a meal, or you feel destabilization in mood and irritability around eating. A lot of that can be because your blood sugars are swinging. And that is because of the food choices that were made that were too high glycemic index, too low nutrient density, and often low fiber. And so looking at foods like these that have much more nutrient density and fiber and are slower to absorb will keep you feeling more even and energetic throughout the day. This is a very busy slide. I apologize. This is for people to look at after, but this is just underscoring the importance of water and how important water is for things like immune support. Like, we don't think of water as an immune supporter, but water plays a big role in decreasing inflammation in the body. And it's one of the chief transporters of a lot of our nutrients. So if we're significantly dehydrated, which many people are, you can eat these great nutrients, but they can't transfer around your body as efficiently if you don't have enough water in your system. So getting good, clean water, I do urge, if you are able to filter your water, just because we sort of never know. I know we feel like we have pretty good water, in the city, but at the same time, there's always stories like Flint, Michigan that we get surprised by. And so if you have the ability to not drink bottled water, but just buy a simple water filter, most of those will remove some of the bigger, offenders to water contamination. And so then when do we need to add a supplement? So when your child won't eat any greens or broccoli, when you can't realistically get something like vitamin D we get from the sun, when the sun hits our skin and activates a molecule in the skin to mobilize and then be transformed into vitamin D. And, in Cleveland, we probably get enough sun to do that between late May and maybe mid-September. And then otherwise, a lot of times, it's 35 and we're not going to go outside in t-shirts and shorts. The foods that are rich in vitamin D are not foods that kids are going to eat a lot of. So things like sardines may not be something your child eats readily. While they do supplement vitamin D in milk and things like that, it's not well absorbed. And so I see people all the time with critical vitamin D deficiencies and subsequent really severe illness. So vitamin D is one we'll talk about that I really believe in supplementing. And then, if you're on medications, maybe you have to be on like antibiotics. Sometimes you have to take antibiotics. You want to protect things like what's called your microbiome, the little living space in your gut. And we actually have more bacteria in our gut than we have cells in our own body. And those bacteria play a really important role in immunity, and they generate vitamins for us, especially B vitamins. And help us to digest our food and play a really critical role in balancing things like our tendency to have asthma and allergies, and they can affect our mood pretty dramatically as well. And so supporting that microbiome with probiotics is a strategy that I think is really important to be aware of. So we want to use our supplements to fill in the gaps between, things that we can't get in our diet, either because it's not available to us or our child just won't eat it for whatever reason. And we need to give that extra support. So the big three, as I've alluded to, are vitamin D, fish oils, omega-3 fatty acids, although you can also get good omega-3s from certain plant foods. Walnuts are particularly rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Olive oil is particularly rich in omega-3 fatty acids. So nuts and seeds and good oils. Bad oils are actually rich in something called omega-6 fatty acids, which can be very pro-inflammatory. So I would avoid oils like corn oil and what's often called vegetable oil and some of those other oils, and try to steer towards olive oil, avocado oil, and a few of the other oils that have a better profile. But olive oil is probably your best choice if you have access to it. And then probiotics we'll talk about as well. So vitamin D is called the sunshine vitamin, not because it actually comes from the sun, but because the sun's rays actually activate it in our body. We know it absorbs it helps with calcium absorption and builds strong bones and teeth, but it also reduces inflammation, it modulates cell growth, immune function, glucose metabolism, and there's over 1,000 different genes and processes that vitamin D is critical for. So when we get low in vitamin D, there's a whole bunch of things that can go awry. We can get sick more often. We can develop autoimmune disease. We can develop allergies and asthma more, or we can have mood imbalance from it. And so, vitamin D is particularly critical to pay attention to. And this vitamin also, it's really, really important for people with more pigment. The darker your skin is, the more melanin it has in it, the more sunlight you need to activate the vitamin D process in the body. And so if you have more pigment in your skin, your need for vitamin D is relatively higher. And so I see a lot of my patients come in and the normal low level, the low end of what I want to see is 30 as a level for vitamin D. I've seen people this week with a vitamin D of 6, 7, and 8 in 3 different people. And they have very kind of bizarre constellations of health problems secondary to this. So I do believe your doctor should be checking it. I do believe it is one that we generally want to supplement. It's inexpensive, it's easy, it has a very minimal flavor profile many times, and should be a high priority for you. Frequently deficient. And the dosing is where you have to work with your doctor. Doses run from 400, what's called international units per day, to often as high as 10,000 a day, some people need. So you have to be cautious with some toxicity for this particular supplement, just because it's fat soluble and it can build up in the body. So this gives you a little more information on, I aim for levels of 40 to 60 on that scale of 30 to 100. If you're a breastfeeding mom, you can take vitamin D yourself, and studies show that if you take 4,000 to 6,000 units a day, which is generally a very safe dosing range, it will get your breast milk up to about 400 units per day, which is very good for a baby. That will actually be sufficient for an infant. And so that's another way to do it if you don't want to give anything to your infant, just out of caution. That's totally fine. The omega-3 fatty acids, these are things our body can't make. We have to consume them. You can also consume what's called ALA, which your body can convert to these other forms, the EPA and DHA. And the ALA is a form of the fatty acids that are higher in plant products. So if you're vegan or more strictly vegetarian, you can still get good omega-3 fatty acids from different plant-based sources, and things like algae oils and things that are available. But these are anti-inflammatory, and they're also really critical for brain growth and development. So this was a nice article that was a recent one that says the importance of marine omega-3s, so fish oils, for brain development and the prevention and treatment of behavior, mood, and other brain disorders. And so DHA plays a significant role in mental health throughout early childhood and into adulthood. Evidence indicates that low intake increases the risk for ADHD, autism, bipolar disorder, depression, and suicidal ideation. So again, these nutrients are critical to us, and whether our kids like them or not, we've got to find a way to get them in, because they need them, whether they like them or not, which is a hard thing, but I also want it to be motivating. It's like, just because the kid doesn't like it doesn't mean it's not critical for them. And so, working with your health provider to find creative ways to get them in. There are numerous products out now for omega-3 fatty acids. If people can do pills, it's super easy. There's this product here that I've used for many years for infants, which is really nice. It's high in that DHA component that helps with brain growth and development. The algae omega here is a vegan product. This product here has very low dosing. You only need like a quarter to a half a teaspoon that you got to hide in something to get in. And then there are other products that have better flavor also too. There's a few on the market. Barlean's Omega Swirl is one that I've used a lot that many kids actually really enjoy. It's one of the best tasting ones on the market. So the EPA component decreases inflammation. The DHA helps with brain health. And you got to read the label, because many products will have, they'll say 1,000 milligrams of fish oil, and you'll turn it around and you'll see EPA, DHA, and other omega-3 fatty acids, which are basically filler oil. It just means they didn't refine it. And don't pay money for things that don't have much, EPA and DHA, because that's what you're going for. So you'll find equivalently priced products, one of which is high potency and one of which is just kind of garbage. And don't do anything with like gummy worm omega things. Those are candy marketed as a supplement, and they're just not worth your investment. And then probiotics. These are the good bacteria that live in our gut, and you can take them as supplements that help to support normalcy. If you are on antibiotics, there's a beneficial yeast called Saccharomyces boulardii that is a easily findable product, and it's not killed off by antibiotics, so it can help support you if you have to be on antibiotics. But these support digestion, produce vitamins, act as defense barrier, and other things that really help to regulate our overall health. Numerous products available out there. What I recommend to my patients is that they aim for a product that has 40 to 60 billion count per dose, and 6 or more strains. And if you find a product with those characteristics, you generally have a product that's a pretty good tier of product. I would generally recommend picking a refrigerated product. There are some shelf stable products. This is a high-end shelf stable product, for example. But most of them, unless they're like that, will need refrigeration. So be careful where you buy them. Don't buy them off the internet and have somebody who you don't know ship them to you, because they'll just be dead on arrival. Essentially, these are living products and they have to be managed appropriately, or you're just consuming basically a powder. So these also can be really easy to get in. They're low volume a lot of times, and very high yield in terms of digestive health, as well as other things. So great for constipation, diarrhea, as well as other issues. There are also things called prebiotics, which are the food for the probiotics. These are non-digestible sugars. They're also mildly laxative. So if your child has constipation problems, a probiotic plus a prebiotic can be a great, very natural, very, essentially side effect free and really healthy way of fixing that, rather than just relying on Miralax or some other, sort of chemical product for improvement. And then do you need a multi, again, it depends on what you're eating. If you're eating a really healthy whole foods diet, probably not actually. If you are going to do a multi, I would either get a higher potency multi like some of these products here, or avoid them. I don't think there's any yield unless your child is seriously limited and there are no other options to the really low potency, sort of low quality, common sort of multivitamins. I think they're just kind of, they're a candy in a different form. If they're a gummy, they're probably not all that nutrient dense. So just consider those carefully, because there's better ways for you to invest in healthy eating and healthy living. Magnesium is another supplement that many people find helpful for mood and digestion. It helps to do many things in the body, and it's also another thing that can be frequently deficient in the food supply because of the way foods are grown. So many of us can be low in magnesium, and if you have headaches and anxiety and constipation and some of these other things, magnesium can sometimes really help with that, muscle cramping and things too. But many magnesium products are laxatives, so be a little cautious there. And then BComplex helps to build energy in the body. These are rich in whole grains. A lot of vegetables have good B vitamins. And so these can also be something that in some cases is worthy of supplementation. If you do, I recommend picking products that have the B vitamins in what's called the active forms, which are a little bit higher quality than some of the other forms of the B vitamins. And if you look for the vitamins in this form, it'll also usually give you a clue as to the sort of quality tier of the product that you're looking at. So UH does have a relationship with a company called Wellevate, and so you can log on and create an account, and there are products on there that are good quality, and that's a reliable company to purchase from. You can also find these at many reliable health food stores and other places as well. So just a brief word about Connor Integrative Health, where I work. I provide integrative medicine consults. So I do comprehensive lifestyle, and overviews as well as treatment using integrative medicine techniques like acupuncture, herbal medicine, nutrition, supplements, body work kinds of things. And then we also have a wide range of other services at Connor, including hypnotherapy and biofeedback. We have a new practitioner there. We have yoga, meditation, chiropractic, and inpatient music therapy, art therapy as well. Many of our services are covered by insurance. Integrative medicine consultations, osteopathic, chiropractic is almost always covered by all health insurances, and acupuncture is increasingly covered. The Medicaid plans in Ohio, I'm delighted, are now covering acupuncture for headaches and a number of different pain conditions. And so it's really expanded the accessibility for many of our citizens to be able to access that. And the indications for it are expanding as well. So, if you have a question, you can always call our offices and they'll tell you whether or not, you may have a covered service. So I will stop there and open things up for questions.
Hello. Okay. So thanks again all for participating. Thank you, Dr. Miller. That was an information nutrient dense,
Yes.
information dense presentation. And I learn a lot of these things over the years, and I have tried to put all these practices into place, but boy, it's interesting to hear it all again.
Yeah.
So the first question we got, and that I think is important, was, will these slides be shared with people?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
do we have your
absolutely.
permission? So we can do
Please.
that. Great. And
Yeah.
we are recording this, and it will be on it will be on our YouTube channel once we edit it a little, just clip out the first parts where I was chatting before the presentation began. But oh, we have a bunch of questions coming in. So someone asked about, she said she takes cod liver oil, started when she was pregnant, 1 teaspoon a day.
Great.
It has 500 milligrams DHA, 400 milligram EPA per teaspoon. Would you recommend adding this to her 15-month-old's milk once a day? Should she use less than a teaspoon? They get the Clear Labs probiotic once a day and still are breastfed, but
great.
Sure.
Those are good quality products. Yeah. No, I mean, the cod liver oils, the only thing you have to be careful about is some of them are very high in vitamin A and vitamin D. And so with the product that you have, just look at those nutrient levels. You're not going to, that amount of omega-3s is very safe and is great for a 15-month-old. It'll really help with brain growth and development and nervous system health. And so I have no concerns at all about giving a teaspoon of that from the omega-3 standpoint, but just double check your product, make sure it's not too high in vitamin A and vitamin D, because those can vary kind of wildly depending on which product you purchased. And so if they are too high in that product, you could pick up a product that has just the omega-3s in them and then separately support the D and the A and things like that in a more controlled way.
And just since you're talking about supplements, I know I'd been told I have to take some B vitamin B2 and magnesium and CoQ10 for migraine issues. But when I met with the doctor prescribing those, he said, make sure to get one that has the NSP, or that stamp, on it.
Right. There's a few different certification pathways for supplements. And so good manufacturing practices is one of the stamps. A GMP label, maybe one that you see. The NSP label, again, is a sort of a quality control kind of measure. And the idea is basically that this, because of the way we regulate supplements or don't regulate supplements, there are holes in sort of the rules around manufacturing quality. And so you generally want to be careful about what you buy because they're not as tightly watched. And so there can be frequently found contaminants in different products, that you can have wildly different actually amounts of things in products rather than what's listed on the label, sometimes too high, sometimes too low. And sometimes there are even undeclared things in the products, usually not like in B vitamins or those things, but for example, in protein powders and in bodybuilding products, many times they've found like hidden testosterone that people have put into those products. And so bodybuilders are like, wow, I'm getting great results. It's like, well, Yeah, but you're also using an illegal source of, anabolic steroids by accident in that
Wow.
product. So yeah, so that's a measure of caution.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. And then someone asked, what is a good fish to eat? Do you have some that you recommend maybe over than others, more than
Yeah,
others?
it's an interesting question, because we tell people everybody to eat seafood, but that's a very vague recommendation. And so, in generally, like salmon, of course, is one of the top fish that people like for the omega-3 profile. But even, you have to watch sort of how the salmon is raised. And so that has gotten better over the last few years. It previously, if you saw Atlantic salmon, it meant it was farm raised, oftentimes in a really like horrific way, in a way. And they were feeding the fish the wrong food. So the nutritional profile of the fish was actually quite bad. Same thing with tilapia. And now you can find sort of sustainably raised, appropriately raised, like Whole Foods has a line of salmon that's farm raised, but they raise it really well so that it's got a good nutrient profile. So wild caught Alaskan salmon is good too. We have to be careful about overfishing and overusing, but that's a really good one. Generally speaking, some of the deep sea wild fish are going to be the healthiest. Things that are farm raised, you just want to know, like, what does that mean from that source? So you kind of learn where your sources are and what they're doing, and it allows you to vet the company a little bit better. You have to be careful with some of the harder fish. So tuna, swordfish, what's the other one? Mackerel, maybe, but it's tuna, swordfish, and there's another one that can be high in mercury. And so you don't want to eat them too frequently. They're not a bad food, but they do naturally accumulate mercury sometimes. And so you have to limit the amount you eat because you can build up some of those toxins as well. So also fish that eat at the bottom of the food chain. So actually things like sardines can be really good as well.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
And someone asked if you could touch on the attention deficit and nutrition relationship a little more.
Sure. I mean, when you think about attention deficit disorder, there's different aspects to it. So one aspect is brain growth and development. And a lot of kids who are diagnosed with ADHD will outgrow it because their brains develop. But you can also promote brain development through proper nutrition. And so your omega-3 fatty acids, for example, are a really great way of doing that, where you're giving the body the building blocks to really optimally express the neurologic system of the body. And so those are also one of the more evidence-based supplements for ADHD. They're not a quick fix, right? Like you take a Ritalin, a methylphenidate kind of a supplement, and immediately your child may be different, but it doesn't fix anything underneath. Fish oils and things like that are slow nutritional strategies. So you take your fish oil and the child is the same, but if you take your fish oil over a period of years, it makes a big difference in the long-term expression, and they sort of grow out of it more frequently and faster than they might otherwise. And then you think ADHD and attention also can be related to things like energy balance and sugar, like insulin levels. It can be related to how effectively can I manufacture neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and those kinds of chemicals are all built off of molecules that you get from your diet, right? So if your diet is poor in the building blocks of your neurotransmitters, you can't make sufficient amounts of neurotransmitters to do everything you want to do. And so things like those kinds of nutrient-rich foods will support your ability to actually create more neurotransmitters to support brain health. And then things like B vitamins can help with energy metabolism of the brain and the body, and support sort of optimal energy usage, which can also end up showing improvements in things like focus and attention also. So yeah, that's I guess what I'd throw out there.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, it really affects how we feel
Absolutely.
from what we eat. So we have a really good question. What do you recommend on breaking habits? This is from one of our moms that I have learned, which is very poor choices. So I don't pass them down to my sons, because it is hard once you have habits to break those. And our society doesn't really make it very easy to break those habits either, does it?
It does not.
Because we're getting the commercials, we're getting the
right.
Yeah, the way, like you described, the way the grocery store is organized, et cetera. So what, and I know from just, I'm sure you're going to say this, but like a lot of times it's starting small, right? So
Yeah.
go ahead and answer the question about breaking those habits.
Sure. I think, right, there are different ways to break habits. And one is, that many people find effective too, is educate yourself as much as you can about the foods that you're eating that you kind of know are bad, that you want to get rid of. So you're essentially sort of poisoning the well, we might say, in terms of wanting those foods. So you'll have a desire to eat the food, you'll see the food, you'll eat it. And the more you think about it, and the more you sort of meditate on that it's really not good for you. And you could even tie it into things like, the big corporations are really designing these foods so that you eat them like cigarettes, essentially, right? Like, depending on what we're talking about, the habit we're trying to break. And so the more you kind of cultivate that, and so you'll see it'll create a negativity that'll give you some space to say, I want to make a different choice. And then give yourself the option that's the other choice, and start making that available to yourself. Another thing is to don't buy those foods and don't bring them home. So like, if we're trying to get our kids to not eat chips, the first thing we do is don't buy chips, and then people say, well, but we love chips and we don't want him to eat them. Like, no, you can't do that. Do it for your child, right? Do it for your child. Let that be your motivation also to drive the change. And then, again, depending on what we're talking about, right, small, slow changes often are more successful than radical changes that feel really foreign, and so start kind of slipping things in there that are good things. Start gradually transforming your snacks. Like, once in a while, choose raw nuts and seeds, or have some fresh fruits and vegetables, some hummus and carrots, or something that is tasty to you, but you might not choose normally, and start making that more and more gradually available. And many times our taste buds will really change, and our bodies will go, I want that now. That actually is what I'm really hooked on, is that food that makes me feel really much better. And then, sort of the final thing I guess I would add just in the moment is, be mindful of how you feel before and after, you eat these foods that are maybe suboptimal, because, if you're able to see that every time you have this food or whatever it is, you kind of feel kind of sick or tired, that'll be a negative motivator, right? Like, we all see that ice cream sundae or whatever that looks so good, or I'm going to stop and get a milkshake from, wherever, because it's milkshake happy hour, but then you eat that milkshake and you have a stomach ache and your energy crashes and you feel kind of gross. Like, this is true for me. Like, I love the milkshake, but I'm going to feel sick afterwards. So I just don't do it, because I'm not willing to feel sick afterwards. And,
or just make it a treat, a very occasional.
Make it a very occasional treat. Do give yourself treats periodically. And then, especially if it's a thing like a sugary treat, eat it with other foods. Like, if you have dessert close to dinner, it will change the absorption of those sugars, so they're less swingy on your insulin levels, and they'll have much less of a negative impact.
And I mean, I know too that I had some issues with my own son, and we had to get some professional help because he has many life-threatening food allergies. So, and he has this habit to this day that he learned from the help we got. He eats his fruits and vegetables before he eats the rest of his meal.
Okay.
So he fills up on those things. So you might try that too, so that you're less hungry for the other things, the other less healthy things. But and maybe I'm hoping we can share more information to give more tips, like in little bits, to folks as we move forward through our Facebook page and in our emails that we send to our Imagination Library family. So to keep helping with that, because it's a big question and a big challenge.
It is. It's a great conversation.
So hopefully some of these questions are going to be quicker, because we're engaged. So if people want to stay on so we can get more of these questions asked, we always like to respect people's time, but I want to also respect their questions. So is sea moss a good thing to give to my toddler?
I'll be honest, I need to relook at sea moss before I give an answer on that one. It's not, when I think of seaweeds, like in general, sometimes there's an overlap between sea moss and seaweeds. Seaweeds can be very nutrient rich. They can be a great food. You have to be careful of where they're sourced, to make sure they don't have contaminants. And then some of them can be very, very high in iodine. And while iodine is critical and you want iodine, you don't want too much iodine in the diet. And there are very few foods that you can overdo the iodine on, but the seaweed family of foods is one of them. So it can be a great supplement, but don't over consume it.
Okay, and then recommended probiotic for children under 7.
So I would think of it this way: over the age of 2 years of age, you can really use an adult product. And sometimes you pick an adult product that's in a capsule and you empty it into like yogurt or applesauce or sprinkle it on food, and you can give it that way. You just don't want to heat it too much, but you can sort of mix it with things that make it disappear. So you can use any of the adult products that meet those quality specifications that I gave earlier over the age of 2. There are some chewables for kids who are sort of around, between 3 and 5. The Claire Labs makes a children's chewable that's some kids love the flavor, some kids hate the flavor. I think it tastes tasty, but once a kid hates it, they hate it. But many kids like it. And there's a Prebiotic infant powder that I like a lot from Claire also. That's a very good quality powder for infants and kids under 2. So those are a few of the products that are available.
Okay, and someone asked, can I give vitamin D and DHA in addition to multivitamin? But sounded to me like you were saying we might not need the multi if we're eating a lot of the good foods. And then I know vitamin D, you have to, even though you said you can get a lot, I just had recently been told by someone, you have to be careful not to get too much vitamin D.
Yeah, so you look at your total daily dose of D across your products. So if you're getting X amount in product A and Y amount in product B, then add those up, and then you don't want to exceed a certain amount. And what that certain amount is a little bit individualized depending on the person's age and sort of habits and things like that. Generally, it depends on the age of the person, I guess I would say. For kids sort of 3, 4 and over, like a total of 2,000 per day overall is usually very safe. And when you get into the adult range, usually 5,000-ish is usually very safe, but that's the kind of thing you want to work with your doctor.
Okay. And then, someone was talking about their 2-year-old's eating habits are sporadic and they get enough fruits but struggle with vegetables. Mm-hmm. So they're working on serving them in different ways, but knowing they don't get enough servings of vegetables. So would you recommend a supplement, or what else would you do? It sounds like you were talking about smoothies as a means to do that.
Smoothies can be a great way to do that too, because you can make sort of a fruit-based smoothie that kids really like and hide the veggies in there and they won't know. There's a number of sort of sneaky chef kind of recipe books out there on the market too that talk about ways to sort of like do things like grind up broccoli and mix it with, your ground beef if you're making like a meatball, and, pureeing it, putting it in sauces and things like that where they don't recognize it. Can be one way to go. A lot of kids will also like food that is with a dipping sauce of some sort. So like a ranch dressing, then you can make a healthy homemade ranch dressing, and kids get a kick out of that. Sometimes you can sort of make it more of a play thing, and so make little broccoli trees, and put them in hummus upright, and put like a little dinosaur toy in there. Don't let them eat the dinosaur toy, and make it a game of eating the trees. So sometimes they think they don't like it, but they also kind of are looking for more fun also too. So you can make a compromise with them, and for sometimes that'll work. Some kids are extremely really resistant, and other kids just need some kind of tweaks to presentation and packaging.
Yeah, and they need multiple. I know they need multiple exposures to different things
that's
before they have acceptance. Sometimes 10 to 14.
Yes,
exposures.
Exactly. That's a great point.
You don't want to force it necessarily, right? But children's taste buds change too. So what they don't like one time, they might like later. That's what I was also told. Sorry.
And that's a great advice. No, I totally agree. Kids will naturally reject things. Many kids, the first 10 times you give it to them, and then you give it to them an 11th time, they're like, "Oh, this is good," and you're like, "But."
Yeah, and then I think someone had a question of like the best way to get fruits and vegetables for a 14-month-old, like, or period, like of whether raw is better. I know like for different things, actually depends on the vegetable, and even chopping it can release things or, make it better. So what do you say about that?
Were we asking about fruits specifically, vegetables, or
fruits and vegetables?
Fruits and vegetables.
Is it more nutrient rich if you're eating them raw?
So not necessarily, but you don't want to overcook them. So many times kids will do better with lightly steamed or like stir fried kind of veggies. It breaks down the cell walls a little bit. It actually makes it a little bit more, the nutrients more bioavailable. Kids have sort of naturally a little bit gentle digestive systems. And so sometimes raw is too hard on their tummies. And so you need to cook it just a little bit to make it just easier to digest, and they'll accept it better. And so also you can do things like using, for veggies, especially like soups and stews, can be a great way to present a lot of foods to kids, because it extracts all that nutrition into the broth. And then it's not even as critical that they eat the piece of veggie, because you've already pulled all the nutrition into the broth and they can eat the broth. And so lightly cooking foods is a good way to make them easier to eat, but don't overcook them. Like if you cook a green veggie and it turns brownish, then you've actually damaged a lot of the beneficial sort of chemicals in the plant. And so, but when it turns like bright green, then you've kind of opened it up and released it.
Okay, great. And then this question relates to mine. So what's a good replacement for popcorn? Because I saw popcorn on that page and I thought popcorn was
so
good fiber, or, you know, decent. Cause I just make some with 1 tablespoon of oil. I make a big batch and I eat it in limited amounts.
So I think if you're doing that, that's fine, right? I mean, so not all popcorn is created equal, in the sense that what happens to the popcorn makes a big difference. Like when we go to the movies and we get movie popcorn covered in whatever the oil is that's butter, and it's covered in salt, that can have thousands of calories in that little box and be really problematic. Homemade popcorn with a little bit of oil and a light touch of salt, maybe a little bit of butter, like that's fine to do as a treat now and again. You know, I would say it is a fine snack to have periodically. You know, it doesn't have a lot of nutritional value to it. It's mostly carbohydrate. And so it's not nutrient dense, right?
So pumpkin seeds would be a good replacement then.
If people like pumpkin seeds could be something that you could nibble on. Sunflower seeds, sometimes kids really like to nibble on. Those would be much more nutrient dense and such too. But like,
or even mix it in.
Bad, right, or mix it in. But it also depends how you prepare it. And then, you know, again, it's still not nutrient dense, but it's fine to have periodically in reasonable amounts for sure.
Great. Oh my gosh. And, you know, I think Mercedes, I'm going to ask my colleague to save the chat and even some of the questions, because we keep having more, and we're going over the time we planned. If you don't mind, Dr. Miller, I wouldn't mind. I don't mind if you don't mind.
I'm okay. Yeah.
What time, but I have to look at my, this is very interesting. So, but we can try to maybe get some of these answers even from Dr. Miller or other experts later. People are talking about, first I want to get this question answered, and then I'll do 2 of them at the same time, even though they're not related, just so we get them. One was asking about, do you recommend sleep aids at all? And then another, they struggle to find recipes with nutrient-dense foods. Do you know of a website that has a variety of recipes that included those nutrient-rich foods to create healthy meals? Any cookbooks that we can recommend on healthy meals, or, you know, other resources? And again, we will try to share resources when this is all done, if you can't get to every question. So
yeah, I would say I don't necessarily have specific full websites or things off the top of my head. Like if you look at, there are good nutritional websites. Like Andrew Weil has been a leader in sort of, you know, natural medicine for many years, and I believe he's got some websites with some good recipes on them. So if you were to sort of search for, you know, nutrient dense eating recipes, things like that, that's one way to go. A lot of sort of like the macrobiotic movement had a lot of really good nutrient dense eating. The paleo movement has a lot of good nutrient dense eating ideas. And so I would look more in those categories of things for ideas.
And I'll try to find some too that we can share.
Yeah, I'm sure there's great ones. I just don't have that off the top of my head.
And I find them in different ways. So yeah. And then the sleep aids, I think I have a feeling I
Oh,
know the answer to that. So, but
well, I mean, sleep aids, are tricky. So the thing about optimizing sleep is overall you want good sleep hygiene is what that's called, which means you also regulate things like going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, having an optimal sleep environment, which is dark, which is either quiet or has a sound machine. And you have real regularity to your sleep habits. That's the cornerstone. And then you can use things to support that. So many people will use melatonin. I prefer low dose melatonin, not the 1 milligram, 3 milligram, 5 milligrams, but even like a half milligram. But I would work with your health provider on the melatonin kind of a question. There are teas like valerian and passion flower and chamomile that have sort of natural soothing and calming effects. There are things like if you do okay with dairy, like warm milk with a little bit of sugar actually can release some tryptophan and help to induce sort of that sleepy effect like you get with turkey at Thanksgiving. So there are foods that are sort of naturally sort of have that kind of calming effect a little bit, and sort of a cup of warm milk is one of the classics. It does need a little bit of sugar in it because that actually changes how it gets across the blood-brain barrier. Foods that have more nutrient density to them will kind of keep a kid full more through the night also too. So eating like a simple carb right before bed can actually swing their blood sugars and destabilize sleep a little bit more. So just thinking about that when you're thinking of a treat.
oh wow, that's important information. Boy, lots here. So two more questions I'm going to combine. Someone wanted you to repeat the information about gummies. She said they're not effective. And then is there a link between low iron levels in children and poor focus or activity levels?
Absolutely, good point. Yes. Yeah, and sleep actually too. So iron deficiency can be very common. It is absolutely linked to attention and focus issues. It's also linked to like dry skin, thinning hair, irritability, and difficulty falling asleep. So all of those can be signs of iron deficiency that appear even in the absence of anemia itself. So iron optimization in the diet overall is very important. And then the gummy issue, it's just hard to pack a lot of meaningful nutrition into that carrier. Kids like them because they're candy. They taste good. They're a lot of glucose syrup that is tasty. There are a few nutrients, like you can do that with vitamin D pretty effectively because you don't need a high volume of vitamin D. But my feeling is like, if you can also get a liquid vitamin D where a single drop that's flavorless is your dose, I'd rather you did that and put it on a piece of food and have them eat it than do a gummy that's going to give added sugar, potentially artificial colors and flavors. So I just think there's really limited, there's a very limited role for gummies as a supplement kind of source for sort of meaningful supplementation, with the allowance that there may be exceptions to that.